What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. What's up, Coach? How's it going?
What's up, Jeff? Ready to talk some regular season football. No, take that pre out of there and substitute regular, and let's go.
Is this not one of the worst weeks of the year, though? Like where you get through the preseason and you're thinking, finally, here we are. No, you got to wait a whole week, almost 2.5 weeks for some teams. But I think the wait is going to be worth it with the NFL regular season upon us. The biggest news that happened on Monday, the day that we're recording this, was one of the holdouts that we've been talking about a lot this offseason. You talk about the Trey Hendrickson situation in Cincinnati. You talk about Micah Parsons in Dallas. You talk about Terry McLaurin in Washington. Terry McLaurin, they're saying 3-year extension, $96 million. Coach, what do you think?
Two things. One, the Commanders got outscored by 71 points in their 3 preseason games. And I know it's preseason, but that's an average of almost 24 points a game. And again, man, you can caveat that all you want, but at some point you have to say to yourself, we got some stuff to fix. And obviously getting one of your best offensive weapons back into the mix is a good solution. So I think there was probably a pretty strong sense of urgency that they needed to get McLaurin's deal done. I mean, the other thing is for Terry McLaurin, that's a great deal.
Hell yeah.
Because he's 30 years old, and he's getting DK Metcalf money, and DK Metcalf is 3 full years younger than him. He's getting 30-something million a season, which is comparable to Metcalf's deal. So if you're McLaurin, the holdout was worth it.
I mean, he's been super productive in his time in Washington with some really crappy quarterbacks. I mean, really bad. I mean, it's like you're talking Taylor Heineke type quarterbacks, like not good stuff. But you bring up a question: should we be concerned about the Commanders' defense, or do you think this is just preseason? Because it's kind of almost like Cincinnati. Like the way you're talking, Cincinnati got outscored a ton in the preseason as well.
I think Washington is much more talented on defense than Cincinnati, and Washington actually seems to care about defense, whereas the Bengals, so like defense is what they do while they're waiting to get the ball back. I mean, like so.
It's like a hobby. It's a side. It's something they do on the side.
It's a side project. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I'm worried about their defense yet, but you do have to remember they gave up 52 points to Philly in the NFC Championship game. Now, getting run over by that Philadelphia offense, there's no shame in that. But then you follow that up with a pretty weak preseason, and I just think that there's got to be some urgency going on in Washington right now.
Now, let's talk about the ripple effect, which I don't think there is going to be much of a ripple effect. A receiver almost close to 30 that signs a 3-year extension worth this amount of money, I don't think this has any impact on the Hendrickson deal, or potential deal, I should say, in Cincinnati, or trade. There's still talks that he could be traded, or the Micah Parsons in Dallas. You agree or disagree with that sentiment?
I agree. I don't think that it really impacts things one way or the other. The only maybe tangent I could see is Philadelphia is in the market for another edge rusher. And now that they know Terry McLaurin's not being moved in Washington, I don't know, maybe it prompts the Eagles to get a little bit more aggressive to see if they can pry Trey Hendrickson away from Cincinnati. A little bit more urgency of like, hey, Washington's got their full complement of weapons back. We need to get after the quarterback. But that might be a stretch.
Did you see any of the rumors going around about potential trades? Like someone reported that, I want to say it might have been Detroit, an offer to Dallas that looked a lot like the Herschel Walker type contract. Did you see this? And Dallas supposedly said no. I was like, if I'm the Dallas Cowboys and I've got a guy who's a disgruntled employee and they're offering what they said they were, which again, take that with a grain of salt, I probably would have made that deal, Coach. I'm not going to lie.
Especially if you're Jerry Jones and you think back to the last time you were successful, which was over 30 years ago. And the impetus for that success was the Herschel Walker trade. Yeah. And could you do it again with Micah Parsons, who's starting to do some things like, I don't know if you read about, they didn't like the fact that during the preseason game, he wasn't paying attention. He was laying down on a training table. He was the only guy out of uniform, didn't even have on his game jersey. And then Brian Schottenheimer said on Monday, like, I'm going to have a one-on-one meeting with him about that. I mean, it's possible Micah Parsons could go like full Terrell Owens, or full James Harrison when he was in his second go round with the Steelers and he didn't like his playing time and he just decided, I'm going to sleep in meetings and piss off Mike Tomlin until they cut me. I don't think Micah Parsons is going to go that route, but I mean, the later this goes, the more you'll probably see some aggressive tactics.
But at the same time, what is this, high school? You're a high school coach. What are you, yelling at the JV players because they're not paying attention to the varsity game? Like, that's stuff I used to have to do when I was coaching high school. Like, if he wasn't wearing his jersey or team, come on. Either get a deal done or trade the guy. That's my thought process on this now, and I think it's the same with Trey Hendrickson. These teams are, pardon my French, they're dicking around on these situations. Either get a deal done or just say, let's figure out a way to move the player. I think that's the best thing that both of these teams, meaning Cincinnati and Dallas, could do. I don't know when this is going to end, though. I mean, there's talk that this could go into the regular season.
I agree with you completely, but we have to understand we're dealing with Jerry Jones and Mike Brown, two owners who have notoriously been hard-headed and selfish and who have many, many, many times not done what's best for their franchise.
True.
So getting those two owners to do the right thing would be the more surprising move.
All right, let's go to our next topic. The preseason wrapped up last week. Week 3 and the preseason is officially in the books, and that means the preseason is in the books. Has there been any team, good or bad, that based on anything that you saw in the preseason has changed the way you view them heading into the regular season? And the answer, by the way, can be no.
I will say that Cincinnati giving up 31 points per game in the preseason. Have you ever looked at the over-unders in the preseason? Like you can bet on?
No, I try not to.
Jeff, I'm not kidding you. They're in the 30s. The over-unders are like 36, 38 points because you got a bunch of backup quarterbacks with these crappy lines and guys at the skill positions who are going to get cut. Nobody scores points. Cincinnati's giving up 31 a game. I mean, they're almost covering the over them by themselves on defense. And now, granted, their offense has looked amazing. But at what point do you say to yourself, we might have some issues? They have a new defensive coordinator, Al Golden, who's coming in from the college ranks, trying to implement his system. I just think there's some serious question marks about how they're going to be able to play defense right now. And I will say this, for the Detroit Lions, a team that is supposed to be in transition, you saw some really good stuff on offense from the Lions. I mean, they had some of the highest rated quarterbacks in terms of their QBR. They scored a good amount of points. That might be an encouraging sign. But for me, the most impressive team in the whole preseason is the New York Giants. I mean, they look great. And again, will it carry over to the regular season? Who knows? But they've built a good defense, and they have some young weapons on offense. And Jackson Dart, again, way too early to say this definitively, but he made a hell of a first impression. So who knows, man? Maybe the Giants will sneak up on some people.
Well, to me, I look at narratives that after the draft, everyone was talking about. It's always about the quarterbacks because it's the most popular and most important position on the team. And everyone said with this rookie crop of quarterbacks, the majority of them are going to need time. And so when you look at the Cleveland Browns, they bring in Joe Flacco. You look at the Giants that you just mentioned, they draft Jackson Dart, but at the same time they have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston there in case they need to lean on a veteran. You look at a bunch of other teams that drafted quarterbacks that did the same exact thing. Pittsburgh Steelers take Will Howard. They have Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph. I could go down the line. But man, the Giants are in an interesting spot here, Coach. I want to ask you specifically about them. I feel like Brian Daboll's coaching for his career. And he was given the leniency to draft Jackson Dart. They went back into round 1 to get him. What do you think they're going to do in terms of the quarterback situation with Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart? Not that Russell Wilson can't handle it, but Jackson Dart looks like the guy. And if you're Brian Daboll and you're coaching for your life and your job, how do you manage that? What do you think they're going to do there?
I'll be shocked if he's not the starter by midseason because you and I as Steelers fans saw Russell Wilson's limitations. We saw that last year.
Yeah.
I mean, the book on Russell Wilson is first read, check down. So he'll go to his first read, and if it's not immediately there, he'll go right to his check down. And so defenses are over-rotating on what they believe to be the first read, whether it's by formation or tendency, whatever. And then they're rallying to the check down. And the Steelers' offense really just kind of ground to a halt once there was enough film on Russell Wilson to be able to get a good idea of what he's doing. The same thing happened back in Denver 2 years ago with him. He at this point in his career is limited. And at what point will that not be enough for the Giants? And if Brian Daboll is in fact coaching for his career, then you got to find out what you have in Jackson Dart. Don't go down. If your ship's going to go down, wouldn't you rather go down trying to figure it out with Jackson Dart than with a guy in Russell Wilson who you know can't steer you away from the iceberg?
Well, even if I'm like the Mara family or the general manager, I'm telling Brian Daboll, hey man, if Russ is struggling, get him the hell out of there. Because whether you're here or not, we need to know what we have in this first round pick. Is this a quarterback that we see being here for 5 years when you have the 5th-year option? Or is this a guy that doesn't have what it takes? He's going to go through growing pains, even though he looked great in the preseason. There can be some smoke and mirrors there. But still, you got to see it, but you don't want to throw him in too early. I think your assumption of mid-season is very on point. And I want to switch gears, keep the same topic, but let's go to Cleveland. Your buddy Kevin Stefanski, who's been kind enough to be on your podcast 2 straight years now, he's been in some hot water. And I messaged you the other day and said, man, Stefanski's getting killed. And you were at a Phillies game and you didn't see what was going on. Have you caught up with the news yet about how people were saying that Stefanski set up Shedeur Sanders for failure based on who he was playing with, the game plan compared to Dylan Gabriel? Have you heard all that stuff? What are your thoughts? I'm curious.
It's garbage. I think that's complete garbage. Shedeur Sanders is a quarterback who, coming out of college, did not know how to read a defense.
Right.
He did not have a deep enough or broad enough football education for him to be able to run an NFL offense in the way it needs to be run. Dylan Gabriel way further ahead of him. So when Dylan Gabriel was out there on the field, you could put him with the better players who are executing the more evolved concepts. You couldn't put Shedeur Sanders out there because he wasn't going to be able to do that. So you put him with some of the lower end players, and you keep the game plan a lot simpler. I think that's fairly easy to understand. But there's a crowd out there, a pro Shedeur Sanders crowd, who believes there's some kind of bias against him, that the league colluded against him. I've seen stuff on Twitter. Oh, the league wanted to blackball him because they don't want Dion. He's a headache. Blah, blah, blah. That's all garbage, man. There's nothing complicated here. Shedeur Sanders just is, he's a guy with a lot of talent who just isn't there yet developmentally. He's a developmental quarterback, but people don't want to accept that.
All right, so let me ask you this question, because I've talked about this with Wesley Coleman, who's on my show tomorrow, the way we see it. He thinks that Kevin Stefanski is almost in a Brian Daboll type situation. What do you think about his job stability in Cleveland?
I think that both Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry feel fairly confident in their job status. And I believe that because of the way Cleveland approached the quarterback position this year. If they had a lot of draft picks and a lot of draft capital, if they felt a tremendous sense of urgency to solve that problem now, then you would have seen them be a hell of a lot more aggressive than waiting around to get Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. I mean, they traded down in the 1st round to take a defensive tackle. Like, what does that tell you? That tells you that they didn't feel like the solution to the quarterback position was there this year, and they were willing to wait. Well, if that's the story, if that's your narrative, then you better give your coach and your GM the opportunity to draft the quarterback that you want. So he's a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year who has had a disastrous quarterback situation. I would be shocked, unless it obviously goes way off the rails this year, if he's fired.
So I want you to put yourself in Coach Stefanski's shoes for a second. If you could draw it up, how would you be working the quarterback situation? And let's assume the line on the Browns this year is 5.5 wins. Let's assume it goes in that direction, meaning they're struggling. They're not winning a lot of football games. You're not keeping Joe Flacco in there for the whole season. What exactly would that transition be for you if you were dealing with, let's assume also 4 quarterbacks make the team?
Yeah, so they've already said they're going to keep all 4.
Yeah.
So Joe Flacco is your placeholder. When you feel he's ready, you need to find out what you have in Dylan Gabriel. I believe he's going to be the number 2. Kenny Pickett is your insurance if Dylan Gabriel can't get it done. And Shedeur Sanders is your developmental guy who you're stashing and you're going to try to develop him and maybe see what he can be a year from now. But I really believe that they're going to give Dillon Gabriel an opportunity to be QB1 at some point, that they're going to find out about him, because I think we know what Kenny Pickett is at this point, and we obviously know what Joe Flacco is. What's Dillon Gabriel? If they do nothing other than, if they win 6 games but they find out the answer to that question, what's Dillon Gabriel, it's probably a successful season.
And that would be fascinating, because when he was selected in the 3rd round, no one saw him being picked there. Everyone was thinking Shador. There was, I think Jalen Milroe was still on the board at that time. There were a lot of other names out there. Will Howard obviously was out there. The guy from Syracuse, his name escapes me, that went to Philadelphia right before Will Howard did. Kyle McCord, there you go.
Yep.
And they took this guy out of Oregon, this Dillon Gabriel, who's smaller in stature, doesn't have the biggest arm, but he's accurate, he's intelligent. If they found one there, boy, that would be a great pick for them as a 3rd round selection, kind of like a diamond in the rough type deal. Well, we'll see what they can do with him. That's going to be one of those many quarterback teams. It's going to be defined by how they handle the quarterback situation. We'll see how that goes. Let's talk about our next topic, another quarterback who has been told he is not starting this year, and that's Anthony Richardson. The Colts have spent a top 5 draft pick in getting him out of Florida, and he loses out to Danny Dimes. And so, Coach, what did you think about Anthony Richardson not being named the starter in Indianapolis?
I think it's really bad for Anthony Richardson if that's the deal, because you have to believe that Indianapolis, given all of the capital they expended, the number 4 overall pick in the draft, to acquire or to get him, that they wanted him to win that in the worst way. That's the guy that they want to build around. And, we talked about having a pretty good idea what you have. I think they have a pretty good idea what they have in Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a quarterback that might be able to win him 7 or 8 games, but it's not going to take him very far. Anthony Richardson's a guy that if you can get him right has the potential to be a superstar. But they obviously don't feel like they can get him right, whether that's mentally or physically. And by him losing this competition to Daniel Jones, it may signal the end of his time in Indy. He may need a change of venue to try to jumpstart his career again.
I saw their quarterback coach. He did an interview, and they asked him, like, what do you think, again, physically, mentally, what is missing? And he kind of said, we've done everything we could. As a coach who's worked with quarterbacks, as an offensive coordinator, is that not a pretty damning statement? Would you ever say publicly, I've done everything I can, nothing can help this guy? What do you think about that statement from that coach? I thought it was pretty damning.
I would never say it publicly, even though I know it to be true. I mean, we've had quarterbacks who were making the same mistakes as seniors as they were as freshmen, that we just couldn't fix them. But you never throw them under the bus like that, man, especially the quarterback position, because you know that opens up this. I mean, that's red meat to the journalists, man, and to the content creators like people like us, because you throw your quarterback under the bus and suddenly now we got a million articles we can write. Exactly. And then I want to dig into the film, and I want to start going, ooh, let's find all the examples of where they couldn't fix him on film. You just can't do that.
Do you think Anthony Richardson was the victim of being thrust into the lineup too early?
100%. He was the victim of that. Remember, he only played 12 games at Florida.
He was overdrafted. That's what I always thought. He was overdrafted.
His completion percentage in college was 54%. And if I go back to Coach Stefanski, and when I met with him at the Combine, he was talking up Dillon Gabriel. And the 2 things that he said he looks for in a quarterback are decision-making and accuracy. And those are the 2 things where Anthony Richardson was not developed enough. So he had all the physical gifts, but he didn't have the things that are going to make you the most successful to play that position in the NFL. And I don't know if he'll ever have them, but when Indianapolis has, quote-unquote, given up on him, that means it's time for him to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think just off the top of my head, has there ever been a quarterback that was thrust into the situation too early who gets moved to another team and sees a massive amount of success? I can't think of many. It almost feels like...
I think Sam Darnold is probably the go-to example.
Okay.
But it took him a while. Here's a crazy thing, Jeff, about Anthony Richardson. He's younger than most of the quarterbacks taken in this year's draft. He's 24. Tyler Shuck's 26. Cam Ward's 24, older than Anthony Richardson. Dillon Gabriel's 24, older than Anthony Richardson. Like, are you going to give up on a guy who's the same age or younger than many of the quarterbacks drafted this year? That's the thing that shocks me as well.
Well, let this be a cautionary tale to all football fans out there. We've talked about these quarterbacks already, the Jackson Darts, the Shador Sanders, the Dylan Gabriels. You could throw in any number of other quarterbacks who are young and or rookies. Sometimes putting them in the lineup too early can really hinder their overall development and maybe them being a long-term answer. Now, I'm not going to go as far as saying that if Anthony Richardson would have been eased into it, that the results would have been very different, because I don't think he wasn't a very polished product like you kind of alluded to already coming out of Florida. But it could have been better. I think this was an organizational failure to Anthony Richardson. I think he does need to leave, and they need to get him out and find just let's cut ties. You agree or disagree?
I do. I agree with that. I think there's a big difference between Anthony Richardson and his 12 starts in college versus Cam Ward, who's going to be the day one starter in Tennessee as a rookie. But Cam Ward's been a starting college quarterback for 3 years. He's got a ton of experience. He's much further along in his development. And, there's always a risk. Tennessee's not very talented at the skill positions. They're not going to be a real good football team this year. Could they ruin him? But that would be more surprising just because he's so much further along in his development.
There's something about Cam Ward, too, and you talked about this on your podcast last week. I think it was your openers podcast on the Call Sheet Daily. There's something about that guy. He seems like he has the toughness to deal with it.
Yeah.
And to me, the Anthony Richardson thing is not about him having a poor completion percentage or him getting hurt from time. It was like when he tapped himself out of the game. You and I talked about that. Like, he tapped himself out of the game. He said, I need a break. The optics are bad. They're not all cut from the same cloth, so to speak. And I think that Cam Ward, I think he's got it. I think he is going to be, I'm not saying he's going to be the next great thing, but I think he has the mental toughness. You agree with that?
Yes, that tapping out of Anthony Richardson, that is way more mental than it is physical. It's the not understanding the optics to your teammates of what it looks like when you, as the starting quarterback, take yourself out of the game because you're tired. Because every other dude on the field is like, you're tired. Like look at the positions we play. You don't think we're tired, and you're the guy supposed to be leading us. That was that might have been the breaking point with him. The injuries and the constant stopping and starting of his actual career were problematic. But that may have been the point where they said to themselves, as an organization, I don't know if we can make it with this guy.
Well, we have to bring up Shane Steichen. He deserves some blame here. Not only was he the coach that made the selection, but also he was the coach that last year, when Pittsburgh was in Indianapolis, he gets hit and he has a hurt shoulder. Joe Flacco comes in. They insert Anthony Richardson back into the lineup, and what do? They run a design quarterback run the next play. What are we doing?
Yeah, and he gets hurt and then misses almost the rest of the season.
Exactly. So I think this has been a botched situation from day one, and it continues to be. But we'll see. I wanted to get your take, the last topic here before we get to our player profile. Heading into this regular season, a lot of people like to say, what's the toughest division? And so let's break this down, AFC, NFC. Who do you think is the toughest division in both conferences? Let's start with the NFC. I don't think they get a lot of love on this show, at least because we're both AFC guys. But still, in the NFC, which division do you think is the best top to bottom?
Well, I think it's a toss-up between the North and the West. The North, I think, is you got three really good teams, playoff caliber teams in Minnesota, Detroit, and Green Bay. And then the Bears, if Ben Johnson can get them right, have the opportunity to be a lot more competitive this year as well. And the West, I think, is sneaky good. I think San Francisco and the Rams are both legitimate contenders. Seattle went 10-7 last year, but didn't make the playoffs. I think that they feel pretty good about their situation. And then, you just have to kind of ask the question about the Arizona Cardinals. Is the light ever going to go on there? I'd give the North the edge over the West because Arizona, of the 8 teams there, is probably the weakest.
I was going to say the North as well. What about the East, though? What do you think about the East? Everyone would say, you got the Cowboys, who might still be competitive. They are not going to probably win anything, but they might still be competitive. You got the Philadelphia Eagles. We talked about the Giants. The Commanders should be good. Where would you put the East in that?
Well, Philly's the dominant team. Washington, let's see if they can do it again. Last year, great run, awesome, but now they're on everybody's radar. Everybody's coming for them. Let's see if they can do it again. Giants are better, but still, maybe they'll be a 500 team. I think Dallas stinks. I think they are headed for a train wreck of a season. I really do, man. It just feels like there are lots of warning signs that could go bad.
It feels like you're willing this to happen, like you're
I would
speaking
not
it
be
into
disappointed
existence.
if it happened. No.
Okay, let's go to the AFC now. I think the AFC is a little bit tougher. I think there are some complete divisions out there. What do you think? What's the toughest division there in the AFC?
I think it's another toss-up between the North and the West. In the North, Baltimore, clearly a Super Bowl contender. I think Pittsburgh is much improved over a year ago. Cincinnati, if they get their defense right, is going to be as good as just about anybody. That's a big if. Cleveland's the weakest team in that division, and they're probably headed for a long season. You go out to the West, and the Chiefs are the Chiefs. Denver looks really good. I think Denver can challenge Kansas City for that division this year. I really do. I think that they're a much improved team. The Chargers will be competitive, obviously competing for a playoff spot under Harbaugh. And Vegas will be a really interesting team to study this year. I'm fascinated by the Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly approach and to see how that's going to go out in Vegas.
I'm not, call me a homer. That's fine. I'm wearing a Steelers shirt. I think it's the AFC North. They play a different style of football than any other division in the NFL. I can't think of a division that is built like the AFC North. Can you think of one, any even in the NFC, Coach?
I mean, the NFC North would be the closest equivalent. I mean, those are physical teams that get after each other, and but you're right. I mean, there's just I think when you look at every other division, it's hard to maybe say, oh, that whole division has an identity. But that's not true of the North, the AFC North.
I mean, the Steelers build their entire roster to compete with their division. Not many teams say that. They'll say, like, we're trying to be a playoff contender. No, like, they build their team to stop the Ravens, and that's why they traded for Jalen Ramsey, because they need to compete. And Darius Slay and Joey Porter, they need to try and slow down Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in Cincinnati. Just fascinating stuff. All right, let's finish this up with a player profile. I sent you a text earlier this week and said, this is our guy for the player profile. I want to talk about a guy who came from where I graduated college. He graduated much after. I went to Shepherd College and graduated from Shepherd University. We're talking about Tyson Bagent, who is the backup quarterback in Chicago. He just got a new 2-year contract worth $10 million. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with anything? He was an undrafted player, so therefore he doesn't have to have the 4 years before they can give him a new deal. And they give him a new deal. They honor him by giving him that money. And this guy is from Martinsburg, West Virginia. Now, if you've never been to Martinsburg, West Virginia, it's very diverse, we'll put it that way. But he even said it himself. His dad, who also went to Shepherd, he was there when my brother was at Shepherd University. He's like a local legend. He's a championship arm wrestler. He's a character. And anyone that went to Shepherd knows it. But he said he'd never running water in his house until he was in high school. And that's kind of that area, And he was so thankful for getting this 2-year, $10 million deal. And he stood there and he had tears in his eyes, was crying in a press conference. And then there's people like Cam Hayward. Now, I'll rip on Cam for a little bit. Cam Hayward, who's due $14.7 million this year, has already been given $13.4 of that in a signing bonus in March, and yet he wants more. And then you get guys like Tyson Bagent who are like, I just signed a 2-year contract worth $10 million. I'm going to get $5 million a year. No one in my family has ever seen this amount of money. If you add up generations. And so I wanted to bring him up. He's a great story. He set Division II NCAA records at that level. He could have gone Division I, but chose to stay close to home and went to Shepherd in small Shepherdstown, West Virginia. So kudos to him. Congratulations, Tyson, man. That's a great story. Coach, I'll let you talk about that if you want.
No, you said it perfectly, and his press conference was awesome to watch. Just really enjoyed watching an individual who's achieved a lifelong dream. He's now going to be able to alter the fortunes of his family a little bit. And he seemed unbelievably appreciative of that opportunity. And it does put it into perspective when you have the superstars who are haggling over the extra couple of million on the back end of a $200 million deal, or who are going to get $40 million a year, but some other guy at the position has 41, so now they want 42, and they feel like they've been slighted if they don't get their 42 instead of their 40. Like, that's the kind of stuff I think that you run out of patience for. And then you see somebody like Tyson Bagent, and you say to yourself, oh man, the humility and just the gratitude, and just how do you not root for a guy like that?
Yeah. And he's a backup. And like he had a press conference. He probably never thought he would have one. He just signed his deal, but now they want to talk to him and they want to hear his story. So good for him. But that does it, Coach. What do you have coming up on the Call Sheet Daily this week?
Yeah, some good stuff this week. Our Whiteboard Wednesday show, Paul Callahan, my good friend and colleague, will be on. We're talking. We actually kick off our season on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking about game planning for game week. How do you do a game plan when you have a season opener or during a game week? What's involved in that? And then Thursday we'll launch the Portal, which is our college football show. Big G, Sean Gurley coming on to talk Ohio State. Nice. And I'm working on a guest for Texas as well. So we'll have a guest on to talk Texas and a guest on to talk Ohio State and preview that big showdown.
It's going to be a big game coming up this weekend in college football. We'll be ready for it. We'll probably talk about that a little bit on next week's show. Make sure you check out the Call Sheet Daily wherever you get your podcast by searching the Call Sheet Daily with Kevin Smith. Coach, that's a wrap, man. Thanks for your time. We'll talk next week and really get ready for week 1. Take it easy.